The brand new Zombies map Shattered Veil has been added to the BO6 rotation, and I have to admit, before this map launched, I was concerned. Things in BO6 have been rough when it comes to narrative, map depth, and complexity, and I was so sure that we were just going to get another update with menial progression towards the story and another simple quest, and well, I'm happy to report that I was absolutely wrong. And so far, I am very impressed with Shattered Veil. But that positivity brings other questions to the surface regarding the tactics Treyarch are employing regarding the presentation and delivery of this year's content. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the art direction or the tone that this map is striving for. Now, when it comes to classic Treyarch maps like Origins or Dead of the Night or Shadows of Evil, or even way before that with Moon or something along those lines, there was a tonal atmosphere that the developers would be striving for, and for the most part, Treyarch always nailed it. But with BO6, it's been a little bit different. Now, maps like Terminus and Citadel largely have solid atmosphere, but they'll miss the mark in other ways, whether it comes to the Wonder Weapon presentation or how the storyline was presented. And then you'll have maps like Liberty Falls and The Tomb, which have parts of the map that are quite beautiful and breathtaking, but there isn't much reason for it other than just because. And when you have a just because kind of storytelling medium, it can be problematic with the immersion that a map can provide, and I actually think that Shattered Veil finally alleviates this problem that we've been experiencing inside of BO6 when it comes to art direction and presentation. As right off the bat, you're spawning in, being greeted by Sam, make your way up through the mansion to turn on and power the elevator. Zombies are pouring out of it, there's smoke bellowing out, the elevator crashes, and before you know it, you're down inside of the lab bunker face to face with this monstrosity that is the Sam AI. And it's just a very wonderful way to be welcomed into the map. You can feel that there are problems here. You can feel that there is something awry and that our characters are going to be doing their damnedest to take care of it. This also is quite reflective in the map's layout, which is confusing, it's cluttered, it's messy. Half the time, I have no idea where I am. And I really like that because it's going to give me time to learn the map, and eventually I won't be lost and I'll know where the hell I'm going. But right now, I'm always turned around. It reminds me of those early moments of Dead of the Night or Blood of the Dead, or hell, I've been recently playing Die Rise. I'm always lost in that map due to the verticality, and this map has a little bit of that classic Treyarch confusion, which was designed to say, hey, you're supposed to play this multiple times. You're supposed to get lost. You're supposed to get used to this, and it's okay if you don't know where the hell you're going. I absolutely think that's fantastic, and I hope Treyarch continues this with their other maps, and it makes me a little sad to know that this whole time Treyarch could have been adding and designing their maps this way, but they chose to have a little bit more of a linear approach or a more simplistic approach with their previous maps. And I just hope that moving forward, we could remember that the value of replayability starts with the atmosphere. It starts with the storyline. It starts with how the map presents its problems to you. When the player interprets that a certain way, it allows them to take their time and move at their own pace so that they can enjoy the map for a little bit longer. And like I said a moment ago, as you're wandering the halls of this mansion, you're feeling a little bit of confusion. You're not always sure which way to run. And this allows you to get yourself into a lot of trouble with the gameplay loop, as you'll be going from one corridor to one hallway to one room to another space, and you're always inside of a death trap. And if you don't know where you're going, the gameplay loop is going to catch up to you and you're going to go down, which is why I think this is just a fantastic design language inside of the map, as the fast-paced gameplay loop of Black Ops 6 really does well in this, because not only is the map layout constricted, but it will open up into large areas that allow the player to breathe and train zombies and get ready for the next step or the next part of an upgrade process or whatever it is, giving them a moment to not only breathe, like I said, but then to go back into the chaos when they're ready. And when you're doing certain Easter egg steps, which we'll talk about in a second, it makes them very intense due to the claustrophobic nature of this mansion. And sometimes you just have to say, I can't do this right now. I'm pulling back. I'll deal with it later once I kind of catch my breath. And I don't think we've really felt that in a zombies map in quite some time. Maybe there were some aspects to that with the Tomb when you're upgrading the ice staff, because if you retreat, you just have to do the entire step again. But I think this needs to be a lot more common. But overall, having a little bit more of a tactical approach is a good thing, because then I don't have to turn off my brain and I can actually think about what I'm doing as opposed to just going with the flow. The other thing I really like about this gameplay loop is that it actually kind kind of reminds me a bit of that classic Treyarch feel when it comes to resource management inside of zombies. Now, one of the most important things in classic zombies was making sure you had enough points to get through the map, open up those doors, get a good weapon so that you don't die quickly. And since Black Ops 6 and modern zombies in general, really starting with BO3 onward, the gameplay was so fast and you were able to get so overpowered so quickly, the early rounds didn't feel as threatening as they did in those first few games. And now, since BO6 has you scrounging for points and the Shattered Veil mansion is so damn big, you really have to be careful with which doors you're buying, which direction you're heading, which weapons you're going to get pack-a-punched, all that good stuff. And it makes you have to get set up way later, which in turn is going to make getting to the boss fight that much harder. The other interesting aspect about the gameplay loop is the new enemies. Now, we have seen disciples before, but in this case, we have something called an elder disciple, which will elevate the damage and health of these enemies, making them tougher to kill, and more harm will be done to you, I believe. But they will also speed up the evolution of a zombie inside of BO6. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how this works in BO6, the zombies will actually evolve from a parasite to a pest, or from a zombie to a pest, but the zombies will even evolve further from a zombie to a pest to a doppelgast, and sometimes all the way up to an amalgam. So while Treyarch did tell us that there were no amalgams in this map used to, exploit the player, there actually are if you let the Elder Disciple on the map for long enough. And I actually kind of think it's a pretty funny troll, because yes, it's true that there are no amalgams on the map for the most part, but if you're not doing your due diligence to ensure that you're not getting swarmed by elder disciples and the minions that it creates, well, you're going to get attacked by an amalgam. So I thought that was actually really clever. The other interesting aspect around enemies is those new glowing toxic enemies. These things are vicious. They spawn in a massive amount of toxic zombies and they explode in your face. They leave chemicals on the ground that slow you. It is absolutely atrocious what these things can do. And again, really happy to see it here because, one of the things about modern zombies that's problematic is the fact that the early rounds aren't as dangerous as they were in previous games, meaning that progression curve that leads you to the end game is almost cut short in a way. But I think Shattered Veil found a healthy middle ground that allows players to still feel vulnerable in the early rounds, makes them have to manage resources appropriately, and in tandem with the confusion and layout of the map and some set pieces along the way, it allows for a classic experience merged with the modern zombies take. And so I really hope Treyarch learns from this and can implement this in their maps moving forward, because they have done an excellent job with balancing the old, the new, and everything in between. Now, as usual, killing zombies feels fantastic, whether it's using a regular gun or the ray gun Mark IIs or the upgrades or the Wonderwaff or even just the regular ray gun. Everything feels fantastic. This is in part to do with double tap, which I am very surprised. I had no eggs in this basket. I did not really care if double tap came back because I was mostly under the guise of it being just a power upgrade. That's how I think about it from the days of Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 2, but it really does change the gameplay substantially. Having a way faster fire rate makes not only the ray gun Mark IIs feel substantially more powerful than they probably are, makes the Wonderwaff feel great, it makes all of my bullet guns feel great, and especially makes the ray gun Mark I or the first edition ray gun feel so much more powerful. Having that extra fire rate in tandem with stamina and speed cola, you feel like you're flying around the map, and I love that, especially with all of the chaos that Shattered Veil brings inside of the mansion. It's really nice to have the tools at your disposal, these offensive capabilities and slightly defensive with speed cola at your disposal, so that you can straight up just be a powerhouse, a tank. So I'm quite impressed with double tap being added into the perk variety, as I genuinely didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. And while the wonder weapons in this map are fantastic, they are something that you're used to, but I will say they feel really good and they slide right into the BO6 gameplay loop. There's no hiccups about the wonder weapons and how they're used and if they're powerful. All that stuff is fantastic. I will say I'm a little disappointed that they are just kind of reskins of things that we've seen before. I don't mind if we have reused assets or reused ideas inside of zombies. That is kind of part of its DNA, is to kind of recycle ideas and bring them back. But I will say that that standard changed from basically the end of BO2 all the way up through BO4, and it is a little bit disappointing to not have something original inside of this map, albeit these wonder weapons are executed perfectly. And when I think about a good example of this, I think to Call of the Dead specifically. specifically, having the scavenger, having the VR11. But if you defeat George and do the Easter egg, then you'll get a Wonderwaff Death Machine power-up that lasts for a long time, and you get it for the remainder of the game as well. So things like that are very acceptable when it comes to bringing in reused content into the map. But what I don't like is resting the entire map's identity on these reused pieces of content, because the Ray Gun Mark II, obviously we've seen that all the way back into Buried, we've seen it inside of BO3, we've seen it inside of BO4, and now we're seeing it in BO6, and not to mention, 2 of the variants are from Alpha Omega. And now there is one variant, I believe it's the R variant, that you can craft and spawn, and I really enjoy using this one because it does feel a little bit different, but it's not different enough to make me think that, oh wow, finally we have a unique wonder weapon for this map. And this is a problem with BO6 as a whole, as we've seen the Jet Gun get a facelift, we've seen the Ice Staff get a facelift, and now we're seeing the Ray Gun Mark II and Wonderwaff inside of this map, leading to essentially a little bit over half of the wonder weapons in this game are recycled. And it's not the end of the world. I'm not saying, you know, the sky is falling or anything like that, but it is a little bit concerning when it comes to bringing in fresh content into BO6 and wanting it to make up for the lost time that we've had with Vanguard and partially MWZ and things like that. That's the way this game felt like it was promised when they launched it with the marketing material. Now, don't get me wrong, things like the Beam Smasher and the swords are great, but it would be much better to have that original content inside the map, especially with a map this important, a map that turned out to be much larger than fans anticipated, a map that turned out to be much more story focused than fans anticipated, a map that turned out to have a very fantastic Easter egg, which is obviously an amazing segue into talking about this main quest. Again, I was very concerned about how this main quest was going to be revealed to us because I've had some issues with how the quests have been handled in previous maps where it's just kind of building the wonder weapon and then the rest of the quest is like 3 steps and we're in the boss fight. But this is a lot different. This reminds me of classic Treyarch, collecting a bunch of stuff, putting together these puzzles, building the wonder weapons having vast utility to help you solve the steps, whether it's destroying the enemies and their own personal challenges or whatever it is. Everything feels very interconnected, and you can start getting ready for the Easter egg before you even start it by going around the map and collecting everything, which I love doing that. That's one of the reasons why I love Origins, it's why I love Shadows, it's why I love Dead of the Night, Blood of the Dead, you name it. It's why I like those types of maps, collecting everything, getting as prepped as possible, having a lot of those steps interweaving over one another. It's beautiful. I love it so much, and I bet you speedrunners are really going to like this map. Maybe they won't like the egg itself, but they'll like the fact that they have a lot of tools at their disposal that allow them to work on multiple things at a time to maximize utility for their runs. I bet you it's going to go down in history as one of those better maps. It's also a very challenging egg due to the layout of the map. It's very tight quarters. You can't quite see everything. Everything's not highlighted in yellow until you maybe kill a zombie and it drops something. They just did a really great job with this egg. I was so surprised. Now, it's not the hardest egg in the world, but it is a little bit longer, so it's going to push you into those higher rounds, and by the time you're boss fight ready, it might be round 30, maybe 35, and that's going to be a pretty difficult encounter. And I'm so stoked for that. I want to fail. I want to die. I want to do this over and over again. And while the tomb definitely had a little bit of those vibes in terms of the boss fight being difficult, the Easter egg was so short with just the Ice Staff upgrade that it didn't give that same tension, that same tenacity that you can feel inside of a Black Ops Zombies quest, where if you die in the boss, you have to go through all of those steps again. And you're like, you know what? I've had enough today. I'll come back tomorrow. That's such a good feeling, and I haven't felt that, I don't even know, maybe since Black Ops 4, maybe Shinonuma. That quest is a little weird. What I'm trying to get at here is having some resistance inside of the main quest is a good thing. It allows players to think about what they're doing before they do it, as opposed to just shutting off their brain, running through the main quest with everything highlighted in yellow and handed to them. And this gives players the opportunity to learn how to optimize, learn how to think about which routes are best for them as a player to lead up to that boss fight. Are you going to be good enough to get it done before round 30? Are you going to be good enough to get it done before round 20? Well, that's up to you, because you can go in and kind of craft this run to be your own experience, as opposed to just having this streamlined Easter egg that goes from step A to B to C to D to the boss fight. You can actually craft this moment for yourself to make it your own. And I think that's very special and something that Zombies has been missing for quite a long time. And while I'm not only glad to see Treyarch bringing these mechanics back, I'm glad to see that they're capable of even doing so, which is something that I thought was potentially lost because the developers that created Zombies in the first place have all kind of moved on to other games or other franchises, or have retired from game development entirely. So it's not crazy to think that the new developers who are working on this game have a focus on new priorities, have a new vision for what zombies is. And so the fact that they were able to create such a convoluted, confusing, wacky Easter egg that you can kind of choose your own adventure with, I'm happy to see it. And it's a very, very positive thing in my opinion. So the next thing I want to focus on is the storyline and the boss fight. It's no secret, I have mentioned it in this video, I've had a lot of problems with how Black Ops 6 has been handled this year, but it's mostly from a narrative standpoint. It's my opinion that the narrative informs a lot of the gameplay mechanics. In fact, I think that they work in tandem together. Now, of course, you can just have a weapon crate on D Machine and go pick up ammo, and that's a mechanic, but you can also have the silver bullets in Dead of the Night and turn that into a craftable or a mini quest in order to get a buff on your gun that allows you to purchase ammo to kill a specific enemy type. So because we have that narrative, it allows us to inform the gameplay mechanics, and I really enjoy that quite a bit. And while I don't think Shattered Veil is perfect in this regard, I do think they do a pretty good job with story presentation in some other ways. I think the ray gun is a really good example of this, having us unlock a doppelgast, kill it, grab an arm, use its fingerprint to open up the enclosure inside of the armory. I think that's really cool storytelling, and I love when Treyarch does that stuff. We'll see how it turns out with some side quests later down the line, but as of now, the actual story of the Shattered Veil is pretty superb. We were able to answer some pretty big questions, and I won't spoil those. I'll allow you to experience it for yourself, but we finally know what's happening. We finally know why Richtofen is doing the things that he's doing. We finally are able to see Weaver and the crew accept some things that they have done wrong, as opposed to just always attacking Richtofen. We understand Sam's MO. We have a lot of information, and now we're able to kind of put some things to rest. I do have some other questions surrounding the Chaos story in general. I don't think we got a lot of satisfaction there regarding court effects, the Staff of Ra, the Sentinel artifact. There's a lot of stuff I'm still having questions about, despite the satisfaction. So hopefully that will be discovered in Intel. We'll dive into that a little bit later in the full review. But for now, I think we're in a very good place narratively, and we can really understand where Treyarch is going with this next map, and hopefully with the finale of BO6 and leading up through BO7. So I think we're in a really good place. It's a little confusing what I'm about to talk about next and why I'm bringing this boss fight into the story section instead of the gameplay section, because I feel like out of nowhere, we're just fighting a dinosaur, and it's a little strange. Now, is it cool? Absolutely. I'm fine with the wacky stuff. I think it's awesome. I love this boss fight. It's super fun mechanically. In fact, I haven't even beat it solo yet. I've done it a couple times. I keep dying. I love that. It's super hard. I just don't understand why it's happening. Is it because of the prima materia? Is it because the Sentinel artifact transformed it? Is it because of ethereal energy? And why is it able to take skeletons from something and transform it into a new being? That's very interesting to me. So I'd like to get kind of answers for that kind of stuff, just to understand the power of the Dark Ether or the power of prima materia or whatever it is. I find that to be a very compelling piece of information, especially for something this huge, and why we haven't seen it happen in other maps. But I digress. I just think it's a little random, but I'm fine with it because it's just so damn good and so damn fun. That boss fight is very, very compelling. It is a super great experience. This T-Rex is just jumping around the map, spitting venom at you. Enemies are surrounding you. Eddie is up top on a cliff, shooting down with a sniper rifle, yelling at you, being his classic Richtofen self. It was just so much fun and so immersing to be in that experience. Just hats off to the devs for that boss fight. It was absolutely fantastic. Now, to just finish up quickly, I want to talk about side quests and the direction that Treyarch is headed. When it comes to side content inside of a map, one of the things that makes maps feel special are having unique experiences that you can only craft inside of that particular map. With Moon, it's the hacker and all of the amazing things you can do in that map with it. With Blood of the Dead, it's the Spork Knife quest or the Hell's Retriever and Hell's Redeemer upgrade process. There are so many examples of these types of experiences inside of previous Zombies maps, and Treyarch has really dropped the ball on these side quests inside of BO6. Now, Terminus is probably the best example of having any of this done right, especially when it comes to that pirate Easter egg where you can get the double points talisman. That was awesome. However, it would be much more awesome if we could get special weapons or other special buffs aside from just double points. Perhaps there's a way we can collect extra augments, or we can build a craftable Aether Blade inside of the Shattered Veil, or something along those lines. Something that's going to make me come back to that map aside from the main quest. The main quest is fantastic, and I love that, and I will always play it for years to come, but there has to be more. That is the standard that has been set up, in my opinion. Now, we're going to, of course, come across things like free perks and free power-ups and stuff like that. That is great. But when you throw all of the gameplay weaponry and equipment into a crafting table, it really strips away the identity of any given map, because now we don't have a place that we can have a special weapon for us to utilize. So while in Terminus we have the double points talisman, and in the tomb we have the golden armor, I'm really hoping the Shattered Veil has another unique item, or even two, that allows us to specifically go to that map to experience whatever special weaponry or other special buff that it can give us, because that's going to take the Shattered Veil and elevate it a cut above the rest. Now, all this to say, I am very happy with the way this map turned out. It exceeded my expectations in almost every way. Now, we'll see about how side Easter eggs are handled, but in terms of the gameplay, the wonder weapons, the boss fight, the storyline, the main Easter egg, all of that stuff, it's very, very impressive. So kudos to Treyarch for this. I do think you guys did a fantastic job, but it does have me questioning things a little bit in terms of how they're delivering their content this year. It's clear that Treyarch has the capabilities to make a banger map like this. We've seen it with Terminus, and now we've seen it with Shattered Veil. But with Liberty Falls and the Tomb and Citadel, it almost feels like they're slightly disjointed, like they're slightly disconnected, like they were pulled from other places and given their own experience to pad out content for season 1, 2, and 3, or something along those lines. I would much rather have less maps that are of top tier quality, pristine quality, as opposed to slightly lesser experiences just to pad out the seasonal content. And if they can do both of those things at the same time, then go for it. Give us quality maps at the seasonal pace. But I think it just goes to show how this seasonal model doesn't really work for zombies in the same way if we go from maps like Der Eisendrache or Origins or Shadows or Ancient Evil or whatever example you want to pick, to maps like The Tomb or Liberty Falls or Citadel, where there are a lot of great things baked inside of those maps, but they're missing some core foundational elements that make zombies, quote unquote, zombies, right? So I'm hoping that Treyarch learns from this Shattered Veil experience and understands, like, this is what the community wants. This is the standard that the community holds Treyarch to. And it's not because we're bad people and we want Treyarch to make us the perfect map every time. It's because we know what Treyarch's capable of. They are capable of making masterpieces. We have seen it before. So when they bring a map like this to the forefront, it really makes me excited again. And so I'm hoping that for seasons 4, 5, or 6, or however many maps we get from those seasons, that they're not just filler content, or they're not just a half-baked story idea, or they're not just more reused wonder weapons. It's actual new, fresh content with resistance in the Easter eggs, crazy boss fights, allowing us to have depth and replayability with the side Easter eggs, a narrative that is pushing forward and constantly moving, with an intel system that's robust. And so now that Treyarch has raised the bar with the Shattered Veil in terms of BO6 zombies, I guess the next question is, will this momentum be maintained?